Hello everyone and welcome. I'm Lauren and today's video is all about tapping into a higher perspective. If you're joining us for this series, Finding Inner Peace Even in the Chaos, this is video 5 and the last practice in our series. So over the course of the last 4 days in the series, if you guys haven't caught it or if you've been joining us for the whole thing, we've really focused on the mind, we focused on the body, we did a cognitive practice, and it's been all about kind of helping us ground, really get to kind of like work through the body, ground the nervous system, and really just make shifts in our internal state so we can be able to kind of move into the next level of like processing or understanding as some of these different events and things are happening in the world or even in our lives. And today's practice is really kind of like the culminating experience to all of it, because we're going to actually be tapping into a higher perspective to receive guidance on whatever the situation or issue is and how it's showing up, particularly in our lives. And so I want to add the caveat that this practice is not one you want to do when you're like quote unquote in it, right? This is a practice when you have created some space between the experience and whether that's through grounding or releasing the emotions, and you're really wanting to like tap into that higher perspective or the next steps that are on your path. And so if your nervous system isn't feeling like regulated, if you're in that higher emotional state, it's going to be nearly impossible for the type of information that I'm going to talk about to be able to come through. So just kind of like do that initial check and you'll learn over time like what that feels like. And it could require, again, like doing practice number 4, moving energy through the body or going out in nature and grounding. It doesn't have to be something where you have to wait days necessarily. It could. You might need to wait a day or two if it's a big event to be able to really like process and be able to kind of step into, a higher state of consciousness on it. But just know there's other tools available if you're feeling like there's no way I can kind of like sit down right now and not be really kind of caught in everything that's going on. And so, kind of the idea here is that with this practice that we're going to be doing is that this is like an overall skill, something that we can really train over time. So it becomes really natural that, today we're actually going to like formally sit down and like actually do what's kind of like a journaling process. But it can also be something you like tap into the moment or you're able to speak out. And every single person is going to have a different process, a different way of doing this. So this is really a practice where you're going to need to build trust, and you're going to need to just like do it enough times that you start to realize like, oh, this is how it works and this is how I feel it. And this is when I know like what is coming through is truth with a capital T. And the reason that we want to do a practice like this is because sometimes, we get into these habitual patterns of like unconscious thoughts or behaviors or any of that kind of stuff throughout the day. And it can be really, really helpful to release the mind, step into a higher level of conscious awareness and really just like go beyond the mind to like receive information. And for me, it's been life-changing really to be able to develop this process. And it's something I teach my clients and it's just create immense impact in their lives as well. And so kind of the premise behind this is kind of about going into a higher state of consciousness. And there's a quote by Einstein that I think is really helpful here. And it goes to the effect of, no problem can be solved at the same level of consciousness that created it. So I'm going to say that again. No problem can be solved at the same level of consciousness that created it. And that is the whole point of this practice, is to get you into a deeper meditative state so that you can tap into a higher perspective to become clear and receive guidance on the next steps, or perhaps even, the broader why a certain event or situation is arising as it is in your life, so that you can grow, you can move on, and you can really take the next aligned step on your path. And as I mentioned before, this is a practice and a skill that really might take time for you to just really trust and to get into flow with. So just kind of allow it to unfold. Don't expect the first time necessarily for it to feel completely at ease. It might, but just show up enough times with it that it'll just become effortless. And then once you kind of start to do this and you really tap into that higher state of consciousness, it's really just fascinating. The solution and angles that you didn't see before can start to come through. And I'll also kind of add here too is that, the more work that you've done to kind of clear trauma or conditioning or blocks, the easier it's going to be for you to tap in on this. So if you're new in the path of awakening or you're just stepping into like consciousness and all this type of work, this practice, will really evolve for you over time, especially if you're kind of in those earlier stages, which is totally fine and perfect, right? We're all showing up right where we are. And so if you're kind of in that position, it can be helpful, like in the early stages of this, to really have someone to guide and support you kind of in uncovering those things, because you can think of it as like you have all these different like layers of armor, and the more layers of armor you take off, the more conditioning, the more blocks and things that you remove, it just creates like a clear channel for this information to be able to come through. So just kind of keep that in mind as well. And then the last thing I just want to mention before we step into the practice is, what exactly do I mean by tapping into your higher self or higher guidance? And so in the simplest terms, your higher self is really that aspect of you that is beyond the programming and it's beyond the ego, right? It's beyond this 3D perspective. From a spiritual perspective, it's the connection to your soul, right? And developing this connection, truly, like I said, just creates this magical shift in your life, just to know that you have the tools inside of you. It's building this capability, really, for you to know you have the tools inside of you that you can always just guide yourself, right? There's this inner knowing that is inside of you that is there to guide you. And also too, if you have a religious practice, that can also be translated into this as well. They can be mutually exclusive. They don't have to be, and they can also work hand in hand together. So please don't let that, keep you from kind of stepping into this. But the whole idea of this practice is really about connecting to you at the core of your being, the center of you at the heart center that has this inner knowing, that kind of knows where you're headed, knows where, the next best step is on your path. And kind of to that point, this practice can also require a bit of a perspective shift in some people. And there's actually another really good quote here that's really applicable. That's by Wendell Berry, that I always have carried with me and carry with me a lot of times in these, chaotic moments that I'm just like, what is going on here? Like, what is the broader meaning or purpose of this? Or, what is unfolding here? And his quote says that it may be that when we no longer know what to do, we have come to our real work. And when we no longer know which way to go, we have begun our real journey. I'll read that one again. It may be that when we no longer know what to do, we have come to our real work. And when we no longer know which way to go, we have begun our real journey. And so from a higher perspective, the idea of this is that any challenging moment is really calling us to deeper growth or release. And so these moments of confusion or these moments of chaos can really cause a lot of unease and discomfort in our bodies, but it's in these moments where we have our biggest opportunities for growth and shifts. So by looking at it from that perspective and then doing kind of a deeper inquiry into the soul, in those moments you can really ask yourself, like, what did this situation, what did this experience, what is it really inviting me to look deeper on? What would it be asking me to look at, to feel, or even to release? Or what is the next highest step I can take on my path? And so when you kind of hold this higher perspective that we're just all on this path of becoming, and these challenges, these situations all present in our lives because they're truly just perspectives for us to grow and evolve in kind of this human form in this 3D experience, then it just creates a whole different perspective on any type of situation. And then you're using this practice to go into that deeper soul inquiry to be able to give you the guidance, give you the information to be able to kind of take the next steps. So let's go ahead and jump into the practice. So if you do not already, it can actually be, a fun thing if you're kind of wanting to do this and build a skill over time to actually buy a journal that's like really specific to this practice. But ultimately all you need is a piece of paper and a pen. I find most people prefer to start out actually writing, but I actually have a couple of clients where they actually have like a folder on their computer or like an Evernote or whatever note-taking app that you use where they actually like to type because they find that their mind does not get as involved in the process. So I'd invite you first to start with a journal, but you can also kind of experiment doing this practice just typing as well, because that actually does seem to work better for some people. And then the first step is we're going to do a brief meditative process, and then we're kind of going to set an intention to actually become the observer, right? And so as we become the observer, that allows us to step out of our mind, to step out of our ego, and allow kind of this higher angle of consciousness to come through to be able to guide us. And so this is this can be a relatively short process. It can also be a longer process. You can go into it with like very, very deep intention. This is really for you to kind of decide and cultivate. And you might step into it in different ways at different times. And so what I mean by that is you can really create like a ritual or a specific space in your house where you actually, that helps you kind of step deeper, right, into calm and centeredness. So you can tap into that higher state of consciousness. And that could be lighting a candle, making a cup of tea. But, the idea is you just really want like a quiet and cozy and safe space, where you feel comfortable so that you can kind of like drop into this higher state of consciousness. And so then once you have your journal set up, your pen and your space is all set to go, you're just going to kind of sit in your chair or wherever it is, and you're going to close your eyes and you're going to take a deep breath in and out. And you're kind of going to go through this process to just relax the body. So that's really kind of step one. And you're just going to relax the body and begin to calm it, tapping into your breath, closing your eyes, and then you're just going to do a brief body scan. And I'm guessing most of you probably know what a body scan, but essentially it is you're going to start at your feet and work your way all the way up to your head. You're just bringing awareness, you're just bringing your attention to different aspects of your body one by one as you kind of work your way up. So you'll start by noticing your feet. Then you'll notice your calves, then you'll notice your knees, then you'll notice your legs, you'll notice your hips, your stomach and your abdomen, your chest, your shoulders, your arms, your neck, your head, and then all the way up to your crown. And you can go through that process, just kind of briefly as I did now, or just spend a little bit more time. But one of the things you can do is if you're feeling like particular tension or you're feeling like an emotion stuck in one area of the body, you can actually use your breath to send your breath to that area of your body to be able to kind of release tension. So the whole idea is after you do this kind of quick body scan, you've connected with the breath, you've done the body scan, now your body's in more of a relaxed state. And that can literally just take 1 minute to 5 minutes, whatever's feeling like you kind of need in that moment. And so then once you've entered that relaxed state, the next step, is to really kind of step into what I called before is the observer state. So for this is you just want to start to watch your thoughts. You want to start to watch anything that's arising in your body, and you just want to start to let go of it, right? So I mentioned before that when we think about the higher self, it's really that aspects of ourselves that's beyond our programming, it's beyond our ego, and it's connected to our soul. And so as you kind of become the observer, you're going to know that as you are writing, as you are journaling in a few moments, this information is not going to be coming from the mind. And so you just want to go through this process of just letting go of that and watching your feelings arise, watching any emotions arise, watching any thoughts arise. So you start to begin to build up this sense of separation between the watcher and what is watched, okay? So if you've never kind of been in the observer state before, this can take a little time to cultivate it, but it is a natural state of awareness. So it's really just setting the attention and then starting to kind of create that separation by watching your thoughts. And eventually you are no longer kind of carried away by the stream of consciousness, and you're kind of witnessing things and passively, and you're not sending judgment, you're not going deeper into it, you're just kind of watching it all flow through. And if you've seen any, a classic mindfulness practice of this is you can send your thoughts into the clouds and watch them float away if you kind of want something more tangible to kind of allow you to get into this. And again, it doesn't have to be anything long. You can just spend a minute doing it. Just doing that practice alone and setting the intention to go kind of into that observer, going into that higher awareness state, there's going to be a shift. And just going through that process of releasing the thoughts in a moment, there's going to be a shift within your mental state. So that's kind of two parts to this, right? Is first we're relaxing the body, and then we're relaxing the mind. And then the next step is you're just going to get out your pen and your paper, and you're going to write an intention at the top. And this can be anything that you want, but I always start all of mine with some type of version to the extent of, I ask for the highest guidance to come through that is in the highest good for myself and for all. I'll say that again. I ask for the highest guidance to come through that is in the highest good for myself and the highest good for all. And so I write that intention at the paper to just kind of ground the practice. And then this is kind of really where you can let it flow. You can just start writing. You can ask specific questions, I find can be really helpful. And when I ask specific questions, it can be something like, why is this situation arising? As I mentioned before, where is there something that I need to look at in this situation? Is there something that I need to feel? Is there something that I need to release? Or maybe it could be something just a little bit more tangible, what is the next step I can take, kind of honor this invitation of what is presenting to me in this moment. And so you can really kind of tailor it to the situation, and then you're releasing your mind and you're just literally letting your hand write on the paper and flow. And if you've never done this before, I think you'll be amazingly surprised by, what unfolds. And, as you kind of start to do this, you also may notice that your mind starts to come in, right? You might kind of go, oh, that doesn't feel right, or whatever it is, because the ego or the body, is trying to release something or might feel a little bit uncomfortable. And so if that happens, you're just going to notice it, you're going to take a breath, and you're going to be willing to release it. And you may have to do that a lot of times if it's something that's highly triggering or whatever it is, but you're just going to breathe in and release. And so you're just in a state of flow when you're writing, and the process is going to be different for everyone. Mine really comes through through words. And so I can just kind of write out, but again, it's something that's hard to explain until you actually do it. And you'll start to realize like it might actually be your voice that the information is coming through with, but you're just flowing and letting it go on the paper, and you'll be able to read it back at the end and know that it's coming from a different level of awareness. If you had just sat down and done maybe what a normal journal practice might be, where you're just like writing and letting things out on the page. And the only thing that I guess I want to mention as well, that I don't want to say this is like a red flag, but just like really something to be aware of, is that you aren't getting too much into the how. Like that's kind of like a clue that maybe the ego's coming in, the mind's coming in, because the way that our higher level or awareness or higher self and consciousness works is it's really an energetic shift. A lot of the like how to is just going to naturally come once we make that shift in our body energetically and start to deeply understand like why the situation is arising. And so it doesn't mean you can't, step in what is the next best action to take. But if you're literally looking to write and get an entire plan of like what you're supposed to do on a situation or the how to, that usually means the ego or the mind is kind of stepping in, and you want to just kind of like reframe your intention, step back into your breath, and just kind of watch how those how-tos are arising. And that's just part of the process too, is just watching like how does the mind come in and all these types of things. So it's just really fascinating. If you stay in the state of observer, you'll be able to detach, and you start to get a really intimate look at how your thoughts and how the mind and just everything works. And then you're also developing this ability to tap into this higher state of awareness and consciousness, which is just, one of the greatest gifts that you can really give yourself. And so this is, guys, like this practice, like that's it. You're like creating this safe space for yourself. You're getting out the journal and the pen. You're doing this exercise to relax the body, to relax the mind. You're setting intention, and then you're just kind of letting it flow, and you're just going to make it yours over time. And my exact process I've kind of honed and mastered, really over the last like 5 to 7 years, but it also evolves over time. And, I also find that my clients, I will teach this, I become the guide for them to be able to tap into this information. I'm kind of like the medium in between their higher self and how they stand, in their current state. But over time, my goal with my clients is to always teach them how to do this process themselves. I want them to be able to kind of walk away after our coaching programs and actually no longer need me or not need me in the same way that they did, right? Because they are able to now guide themselves and able to tap into this state of awareness, because it's a level of awareness that is there for all of us. There can just be some shielding and programming and conditioning in the way, and then it's just really trust and it's practice over time. So I just invite you guys to try out this practice. Overall, just the whole entire series, I hope everyone enjoyed it, and feel free to go back and click into any of the practices if you need to kind of get yourself settled and grounded before you do this one. And then lastly, I just wanted to mention that if you are watching this in, I guess, July or August of 2022, kind of right when we're launching this series, and we have a whole host of people kind of following along, one of the things that I've decided to do and been very deeply called to do just over these last couple weeks is to open up some time on my calendar in August, which I've never done before, for one-on-one sessions. And they're going to be hourly or 90 minutes for individuals and families, where part of the process can actually be guiding you on how to connect to your higher self, receive higher guidance on the next steps on your path. And so if this is a practice you do and you really kind of want to dig in with someone to understand deeper how this works, what it looks like, and just receive additional guidance on your next steps in your path, I'll leave the link for that below. And you're also welcome to visit the link on our website as well to learn more about that. So I hope you guys enjoyed the series. Thanks for connecting today, and I wish you guys well in connecting to a higher perspective.